Well, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our second keynote. Ngozi Cadmus is the CEO of Happiworkers. Ngozi is a TEDx speaker, social worker, psychotherapist, and CEO of the leading UK anti-racist, culturally sensitive workplace mental health solution. Her expertise is in creating anti-racist organizations through a racially informed mental health lens and holding leadership accountable for their commitment to anti-racist practice. Lastly, she is nearing the end of her doctoral research, which focuses on the strategies Black women use to reach the top. So I'm really excited for our second keynote. I welcome you to the stage.
What an introduction. So good morning, everyone. Nice to be here with you guys. I was told that we've got a lot of Americans in the house, so it's great to, yeah, big up, whoop, whoop, whoop. So the great thing about today's topic is about inclusive leadership, and many of you guys will be the emerging leaders. Some of you guys might be, my CEO in about 20 years. So looking in this room and looking amongst the faces, it's nice to meet people at 9 a.m. on a Saturday morning that have come to learn something and to be inspired. So I hope you've got your pads and pens, because I'm going to ask you guys a few questions before I get right into the speech. My talk today might be something you've never really heard before, because it's not something that is talked about. It's a different way of thinking. It's a different way of being. So I challenge you today, amongst all of the speeches that you listen to, the empowering and inspiring words that you hear today, to also contemplate some of the words that I'm going to speak with you today. But before we get into the speech, I just want to ask a few questions, because I believe at the end of my talk, as well as the end of the entire day, some of the answers that you might put for the questions I will ask might be slightly different. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think in life it's about recognizing we evolve, and our thinking can evolve even within a split second, within an hour, even within a day, let alone a lifetime. So one of the questions I want you guys to write down, and it's just for yourself, so it's for your own reflections, is what is leadership? What is leadership? And there's no wrong or right answer, because actually it's not about whether it's right or wrong, it's about what does it mean for you. So what is leadership? And then the next question, which is very similarly closely related to that, is what does leadership mean to you? So what is leadership? And what does leadership mean to you? I've never played with a clicky. Let me just see. Oh, oh, brilliant. Oh, amazing. Okay. What is leadership? And what does leadership mean to you? And what I would like you to do, however you're doing it, when you write these questions, whether it's like you cross a line in the middle or you just write it, because I want you guys to answer that question again at the end of the day. These two particular questions at the end of the day, so you can see if there's any difference between what you've written now at the start of the day or what you've written at the end. Then the second question that I want you to see if there's any changes in what you've answered after my talk is, what is rest? And you hear the word rest, how would you define rest? And then again, closely related to that is, what does rest mean to you? So what is rest? And then what does it mean to you? So again, what you answer right now, it would be interesting to see. And if we get a chance, I might ask randomly in the audience if anybody wants to offer and share at the end of the talk what you wrote at the beginning and what you wrote at the end. So, first question that you answered, what is leadership? What does leadership mean to you? That is for you to answer now and at the end of the day. And at the end of this talk, I want to know what you've written, what rest is, and what it means to you, both now and at the end of the talk. So, my talk is titled, Why Global Majority Leaders Must Rest. So global majority leaders, and for many of you, you are emerging leaders. So when I speak about global majority leaders, I am talking to you. I'm talking to you whether you're at the beginning of your career, at the beginning of your journey in life, as they say, whether you're more in the middle, or whether you're seasoned. Global majority leaders, why can't we just be leaders? In a society that racializes us, others us, and questions our right to belong, we can't just lead without our racial identity trailing behind. We are not allowed to be just leaders. Our leadership is filtered through the lens of whiteness, and anything outside of it is seen as suspect. So global majority leaders, we must learn to rest, not in spite of the oppression we face, but because of it. So rest. Some of you wrote different definitions of rest and what it means to you. R-E-S-T. A four-letter word that every global majority leader has been taught to fear. For Black men, Black women, Asian individuals, Latinx, and even indigenous leaders. Rest is often denied before it is even desired. However, systemic oppression does not clock out. We carry the weight of racism, of xenophobia, of colonization, of classism into every meeting, deadline, and decision. So as I begin to continue this discussion, I'm going to talk about the different groups because we all have similar yet distinct challenges that face us as leaders and also as emerging leaders. This list is not exhaustive, and nor am I even saying that every single Asian, Black, indigenous leader experiences this, but many of us do. So many of us here can relate with that. And even if you can't relate with that, you can at least understand it. So for many Asian leaders, and for those of you who come from Asian backgrounds, and I know in America you guys add Asian and Pacific Islanders, many are pushed to be perfect, to be polite and productive until they disappear and burn out. Battling burnout behind closed doors. In Asian communities, there is the battle of the model minority myth, intergenerational trauma, and the internalized fear of failure. The model minority myth refers to the systemic and the systematic construction of people of Asian descent as representing successful assimilation into a white dominant society, and as living examples of advancement. So for example, in the UK, many people would look at Rishi Sunak, Priti Patel, Sadiq Khan, as those who have advanced and excelled beyond most racialized groups. However, the model minority myth sounds like praise. It's about being successful. It's about being obedient. It's about being hardworking. It's about being quiet. But it's a trap, because behind it masks real pain. It tells Asian people they're expected to be exceptional, never exhausted, but be invisible. If you're struggling, you're failing. If you speak up, you're ungrateful. It flattens the rich diversity of Asian communities into one impossible stereotype. It ignores refugee histories, colonized homelands, and generational trauma. It says racism does not happen to Asian people. It forgets people like the Edinburgh mum, Wei Sayek, that got attacked during the coronavirus. It forgets that the first Chinese laundry that opened in London in 1901 was stoned by a hostile crowd. It forgets that in 1908, British seamen rioted to block Chinese workers from signing onto ships. It forgets the Chinese Exclusion Act. It forgets Vincent Jen Chin, who was racially assaulted in the States. Anti-Asian racism in the UK, it is not new. It is just ignored. Therefore, the model minority myth weaponizes the supposed success of some Asians to shame other racialized groups. It upholds white supremacy, pitting black and brown communities against each other. It demands perfection, but offers no protection. Not from burnout, not from violence, not from being seen as a foreigner forever. So it's not a compliment. It is control dressed in politeness. So within Asian communities, rest is then seen as laziness. Struggle is dismissed as weakness. And cultural shame silences the very real need for care. The pressure to prove worth keeps many individuals from all backgrounds, but in this particular case, from Asian backgrounds, through breakdown. Within the South Asian population, because we have a large population of South Asian individuals in the UK, many navigate casteism, colorism, colonial legacies that fracture the collective power, carry the burden of generational trauma. The wounds of partition still ring and ripple through families. Internalized casteism and colorism create a silent but loud violence within. Religious tensions are exploited to divide, not to unite. And leaders, like some of you guys, rather than inheriting generational rest, inherit legacies of survival. And white supremacy is sowed, division to prevent a collective resistance. Now, when we talk about Latinx, and that's a very big population I know in the United States, got a small population here in the UK, there is a huge demand for the unseen labor of Latinx leaders. Many Latinx professionals are expected to over-deliver, under-complain, juggling the invisibility and the hypervisibility that happens simultaneously within the workplace. They juggle cultural expectations and systemic erasure. Navigating white spaces often mean shrinking, translating, and code switching. For many Latinx professionals, they speak Spanish or they speak Portuguese and other French-related languages, so their bilingual brilliance is exploited, but not oftentimes celebrated. A lot of them fear immigration, economic precarity, racial gaslighting, and all of these things steal their ability to rest. The weight of representation is constant, very much heavy, and a lot of time unpaid. Indigenous leaders are expected to lead while carrying centuries of trauma on stolen land, with tokenized voices and commodified cultures. Their fight is for justice, sovereignty, and survival. But I believe rest must be part of their story. Black men are told to be strong, stoic, and silent until their bodies collapse. They're told to lead without breaking, to grind through grief, pain, and discrimination, to show up strong while battling systemic surveillance and racial violence. Workplaces oftentimes demand their presence, but ignore their very real pain. Their anger, legitimized, is criminalized. Their pain is ignored. Rest is denied. And in a world that fails, their truth but demands their labor. And mental health is not a safe conversation, but it is a silent crisis. Because for many Black men, their vulnerability is punished. Strength is expected, however, but rest is, of course, denied. There's a pattern, right? For all of the different communities that make up the global majority, there seems to be a pattern of rest being denied. Black women are overqualified and often under-recognized, expected to carry everyone but never collapse. The superwoman schema, rooted in slavery and colonialism, stereotypes Black women as endlessly strong, self-reliant, and resilient, expected to suppress our emotions, resist vulnerability, succeed despite limited resources, and prioritize everyone else at our own expense. Sound familiar for many Black women? When internalized, this superwoman syndrome drives Black women towards exhaustion, overwhelm, and chronic overwork. So the superwoman schema, that, oh, you're so strong. Oh, I don't know how you do it as a Black woman. It's not a compliment, nor is it empowering. It's actually a death sentence. Globally, Black women have been directly impacted by the violence of capitalism, with our bodies historically exploited as tools of labor. And for many times, as Black women, we are the backbone of institutions that never had our backs. Our labor is seen as essential, but our rest is seen as optional. So, as I mentioned, there is a theme for global majority leaders. We weren't the same, but we stood as one. There was a time in this country, Black and South Asian communities closed ranks. They had different roots, but the same fight. We actually marched side by side in the 80s and in the 90s against racist policing, against slum housing, against exploitation at work. Political Blackness was more than just a term. It was a survival strategy, a declaration: we will not be divided. Society, governments tried to pit us against each other, but we knew our liberation was linked. In the face of systemic violence, we became one class, one community, and one force. We didn't just witness each other's pain, we took it up as our own. However, 2025, slightly different. So it's something that we need to come together and remember, although we are not the same, our histories and cultures and our wounds are distinct. As global majority leaders, we are bound by one truth: we are weathering the same storm. Whether it's racism, classism, xenophobia, and colonization, we share the weight that we carry generation after generation. So as a united group, I don't mean united under one banner, I mean united under some of the systemic oppression that we all face, though distinct yet different, very similar in its impact on our minds, on our bodies. As Black, Asian, Indigenous, anything that's essentially non-white, whether you're in the UK, whether you're in Canada, whether you're in America, Australia, we have been taught that our worth is measured by our output. For many people who come from these backgrounds, we are taught to work, 2, 3 times more harder. We have been taught that our value comes from overwork, not from being. For many people, you might recognize the typical thing where, you get your school grades, you go back home, and you say, ma, da, carers, guardians, whoever your parents are, especially if you come from Black and brown communities, and you say, oh, I got a B. And they look at you and like, I'm not expecting a B, I'm expecting an A. They look and say, wait, the other person got an A, why can't you get A? In typical Nigerian cultures, they will say, has that person got 2 heads? Meaning, if they have not got 2 heads, there's no reason why you can't also achieve an A. Now, even though that might come from good intentions because our parents want us to do much better than they have, they want us to strive harder, they want us to strive for excellence. Sometimes as young children growing up, what we receive as the unsaid and unspoken messages is be perfect. Don't make any mistakes. Failure is not accepted. But oppression thrives on exhaustion. Have you ever tried to ride a bike while very, very tired? I would not recommend it. When we are more tired, we comply. When we are burnt out, we don't resist. So it's important to know that life is not ethereal. This is not by accident. It really is by design. So I hate to burst your bubble. Some of you guys are going into the market, different careers, being optimistic, and I don't want to take that away. But I think it's important that you are both pragmatic and aware of the realities that face you. For all leaders, but especially leaders that come from global majority backgrounds. And I would say this because I'm aware many people come from the States. If it wasn't obvious, and we say global majority, is what you guys call BIPOC. Rest is not a luxury. It is a necessity. Rest is as essential as a punctuation in a sentence, or the pause between musical beats. Without it, nothing can make sense. Imagine me doing this talk and never pausing. You'd be like, but that's what many of you have already begun. Many of you are Gen Zs, I'm a millennial, some people have got some Gen Xers, we may even have some baby boomers. But for many of you that are most likely Gen Xers, you already began to continue probably what your parents have started. This kind of work, grind, hustle, non-stop, keep going. From primary school, you guys call it elementary school, to, is it middle school, to high school, to university, to masters, to doctorate. I can say that because I did that. I haven't had a pause in education since I was like 2 years old. The endless grinding fuels trauma. Have you considered that? The endless go, never stopping, never pausing, never reflecting, just fuels the trauma that we all, every single one of us, no matter your background, carries, because we carry our genes from our parents. And sometimes whatever trauma they've experienced has been passed in our DNA, and also what we've seen and inherited from their behavior, let alone the adverse experience that many of us unfortunately go through as we grow up. However, when you rest, it begins to interrupt that endless grinding, that cycle of perpetuation, and it begins to heal. It begins to restore balance. Rest is a radical act of resistance against a system that is built to exhaust all of us. Some of you guys may already be facing that in your jobs. You start at 9, maybe you start at 8. And when 5 comes, everyone's still sitting at their desk. And you're like, oh, should I leave now? My contract says I work 9 to 5 with a 1-hour lunch break, but nobody seems to take their lunch break, or they take their lunches at their desk. Gone are the days of recess, when you had 2 50-minute breaks and a whole hour lunch. You don't often get that in the workplace. So the solution is not to grind harder. You thought I was going to say the solution is to work smarter. No, that's for another keynote speech. The solution is to reclaim what has always been ours. Rest is how we resist, which I know sounds counterintuitive, right? In a different talk, because I do leadership talks as well, we talk about empowerment, we talk about ways of working smarter, not harder. We talk about, go in there, smash your goals, and those things are all fine and dandy. But for many of us, we face the realities that sometimes we can work harder and harder and harder, and promotion gets further and further and further. So that means we've got to do something different. Rest is how we remember who we are behind the grind. Rest is how we heal. Rest is certainly how we dream. I don't mean the dreams that we do at nighttime. I'm talking about the daydreams that many of you young people probably stopped when you were at least 10 years old, or maybe even younger. You were told, stop daydreaming, stop looking aimlessly, stop doodling. But some of those stop this, stop that were actually damaging to the ability to envision new possibilities. For some of you, you don't even have dreams anymore. You don't think about, what can I become? What can I do to make an impact? How can I make society different? How can I make society better? So rest is how we lead with clarity. We cannot dismantle oppressive systems on depleted spirits. We must restore to resist. So rest is not passive. It is preparation. It is a refusal to be complicit in our own burnout. I've literally, on TikTok, heard 22-year-olds burn out. How are you burnt out at 22? So it means that there's something in society pushing all of us, whatever age we are, to endlessly grind without considering how we can implement and incorporate rest in a sustainable way. Rest is how we reclaim our bodies, how we reclaim our time, and how we reclaim our future. So every single one of you here, whether you're from a global majority background or not, your rest is not selfish. It is sacred. It is strategic. And it is revolutionary. So let 2025 be the year we choose rest, not just for survival, but for liberation. Because a rested leader is a dangerous one, and a rested movement is unstoppable. So rest is how we say, I am not a machine. I'm not a tool for capitalism. I'm a human being worthy of care, of pause, and restoration. So rest is how we fight back. Rest is how we disrupt. Rest heals. Rest reconnects us to ourselves and our communities. I can almost hear you say, so what is rest then? Let me know. Let 2025 be the year that we rest on purpose. We do not need to earn rest. We claim it because it is ours. We rest not to just survive, but to lead, to liberate, and to live. I believe a rested global majority leader is a revolutionary force. Because systems can't control what they can't exhaust. And I said already, a rested movement is unstoppable. You can't put tariffs on rest. You can't make money from rest. So it can't be controlled. So, as I mentioned, I can read some of your minds. Some of you are thinking, so can you just let me know what is rest so I can see if I answered the question correctly? You can snatch your rest in small moments. As I mentioned before, rest is the pause between musical instruments. You can see rest as a full stop between two sentences. I'm a big reader. I always have a book in my bag. And if there is no full stops in a book, then you would not even know when one sentence starts and when one sentence begins. So rest could be a deep breath. It could be a quiet moment. It could be a stretch. These stolen pauses are acts of defiance. Some of you guys ain't stretched in years. So I think your back is asking for it to be stretched. Your necks are asking for it to be cracked. You might need a bit of a massage, These are moments of rest. We might think of it as self-care, but I would say it's life-saving medicine. For many of you, some of your parents might be retired. And if you notice, their health might be much more improved than it was when they were working endlessly, and now when they've got more downtime. Their health is much, much better. They're not huffing and puffing. Your environment shapes your peace. Now, for many of you, it might not be possible if you live with parents and siblings, but you can still try and cultivate an environment that solidifies your peace, whether it's in your room, if you've got your own place, or somewhere, maybe outside in nature. Create spaces that nourish you. Think about the lighting. Think about how much noise you want around. Think about a place where there's no demand for your input, for your output. No urgency, just you. Take 5 minutes of quiet stillness in the morning, in the afternoon, and night to reset, to reclaim, and reconnect with yourself. Could be while you're having a shower. Could be while you're on the toilet. Log off and reclaim your mind. I'm not going to make any stereotypes about the Gen Z generation and social media, but we know it drains. We know it impacts and it does warp our mind. So step away, reset, have a cleanse. Remind yourself that you are more than just your the Instagrid, your TikTok grill. That you're more than just your productivity. Commit to rest like you commit to work. Or if some of you are not working, commit to rest like you commit to your studies. One day, one afternoon, 1 hour, pencil it in. Do a calendar invite with yourself. I will rest. Prioritize it like your life depends on it. Because I'm telling you, it does. If you don't do it now, you'll be forced to do it later. So, write it down and make it real. And say this with me. I do not have to earn rest. You can repeat after me. So, I do not have to earn rest. Come on. Rest is my right, my healing and my power. Oh, that wasn't too difficult, was it? So write it down, say it and live it. Write it down. It took me a very long time to learn this concept. And I don't think I'm that old, so I'm not too far off from some of you guys. But in all honesty, it took me a very long time to learn this concept because I wasn't taught this at home. I was forced to learn to rest. My mum was forced to learn to rest. So what does your rest look like? What does it look like? Write that down. What will you do today to honor it? What commitment will you make to yourself to honor rest? Because the generations that will come after you will thank you if you can learn it now and you can teach your children that there is no shame in resting. Because truly, there is no praise in endlessly grinding to the point of burnout. If you've ever been burnt out, if you've ever seen somebody burnt out, it is not funny and it's not great. They're not rejoicing in that moment. They're not thinking about the tasks at work or the things they've got to do. Sometimes the workplace has already replaced them before they can even put in, I need to take some time off. You don't get extra pay for burning out. But you might get extra added extra added years upon your life if you rest, and you learn to rest, and you implement rest into your life. So who am I and what I do before we do Q&A? I help Black women heal from workplace abuse and racial trauma through revolutionary rest. So the little bits that I taught you today are some of the things that I am able to help others do. I am resting. Will you join me? As mentioned, I'm a TEDx speaker, psychotherapist, social worker, doctoral researcher, and founder of the Black Women's Rest Revolution, which is a global initiative where Black women all over the world who have experienced workplace abuse and racial trauma can find solace knowing that they are not alone. Thank you. So, we've got some minutes left for some questions and answers.
All right, if you'd like to ask a question, just raise your hand and we'll bring over a microphone, or you can input a question into our Slido, slido.com, SGLC 2025. And I will start with one of our questions from Slido. The question is, from Anonymous, how can we rest when there is so much to do?
I believe that's a good question, and I think that's usually one of the questions I often get. So how can we rest when there is so much to do? So the question I will ask back is this. If you were no longer available, will the work get done? And many times the answer is yes. Now I do think, granted, there are some things only you can do. But if we're talking about the workplace, if we're talking about things that other people can do if you were not there, it can get done. So how do you learn to rest if there's so many things you can do? You've got to realize that things will get done with or without you. Once you realize that though you are important to this thing being done, if you are not there, you will be replaced. But you are not replaceable. So rest isn't stopping. There is nowhere where I said you stop. I mentioned pause. Take a 5-minute break. So all of the things that you think you need to do, I can imagine are very important for whoever asked the question. But I would also just make you think about this. If you're endlessly doing all of the things that you need to do without any pause or break, how do you know that you're doing it effectively? How do you know you're doing it even well? Until you can take a look back and see what you're doing. So the answer to the question is resting is not stopping. Resting is just a pause. It's a time of reflection. So if you cannot have time to even reflect, then I would say that you're entering into dangerous waters. I will not follow a leader who doesn't stop to think and reflect about the decisions that they are making, because the decisions that they make impact more than just themselves. I want to follow a leader who doesn't stop, who is able to say, hold on, I think we made a mistake here. Let's circle back. Let's review. Let's refocus. Let's reevaluate. So that's what rest is. I hope that answers the question.
All right, we can have another question from Slido. This question is also from Anonymous. At what point does discussing racial stereotypes confirm and give power to those stereotypes rather than denying and moving past them?
Can you say that again? So at what?
At what point does discussing racial stereotypes confirm and give power to those stereotypes rather than denying and moving past them?
I'm not sure if denying realities helps anybody. I believe that acknowledging the barriers exist, but thinking about how one can either dismantle them circumvent them is much better. It's much real. I don't think talking about the racial oppression that we all still experience in this day and age is reinforcing, because we're not making things up. We're talking about people's truths and experiences. Now, there's a difference between wallowing in the realities of some of these things. There's a difference between that and just saying, this is what happens, this is what we experience. It's like if you were adopted. You don't deny you were adopted. You acknowledge it, but you also acknowledge the fact that these two people, or this person who adopted you, has chosen to be your parent. So talking about it doesn't reinforce it. It's just an acknowledgement of what is. The question is once you acknowledge, what do you then do with it? So I'll ask you, the person that asked that question, and everybody else here, is there anything that you have denied, ignored, come to bite you right back? It has. So you can ignore it for 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years, but one day you will wake up and you will realize, and you smell the coffee, and unfortunately you will recognize that society, though it has improved, for many of us that come from backgrounds such as the ones I've mentioned, being black, being Asian, we experience difficulties, but we don't wallow in it. I think despite the difficulties, many of us still rise to the occasion. So I hope that answers the question.
Hi, Ngozi. Thank you so much for your presentation. I loved this type of conversation, and as a Black feminist, I'm definitely involved in the rest revolution, definitely involved in rest as resistance. And I think for many of us, like our parents and so on, like rest was a fever dream. You know, it's something that wasn't given to them, and especially to those who are oppressed, those at the margins of society. And for like Black feminists like myself, we see like rest is our freedom work currently. But I think for me, like the question I have about rest is like how can we have rest without each other? I think, you know, rest has to be communal because somebody has to carry the load. You know, if I am giving a space to play, to be at ease, a space to dream, you know, that means somebody's going to share the load with me. So can you talk about like what role community plays in like the rest revolution?
Yeah, no, certainly. I think it's absolutely important. I didn't include it in this particular slide, but a lot of times I talk about collective rest. I don't believe rest is just personal. You rest collectively. The Black Women's Rest Revolution is all about that. We have hundreds of Black women all over the world in one space learning to recover and heal because they recognize that rest is not just a personal thing. It's not something you go alone. It's something that you do together. As you so eloquently put, a lot of the movements in the world that created any sort of change was done together. Whether it's the civil rights movement, whether it's the suffragettes movement, it wasn't one person at the helm. It might be one person we remember, one person we talk about, like Martin Luther King. But without Martin Luther King, there were so many other silent voices that were there, that were standing in solidarity with him. So yes, rest is collective and rest is communal. You can't really have rest without other people, because when you rest on your own, yeah, you might heal and recover your own nervous system, but rest for it to be truly powerful is when it becomes a movement. So a movement of people that say, you know what, we are no longer going to work this way, we're going to do something different. So yes.
Thank you for your talk. My question is based off, like you said, you're the founder of the Black Women's Rest Revolution. But in terms of that, like even building up that company, I bet it wasn't easy. In terms of like transitioning into the work fields of like getting into new work, like I just graduated from college. I want to work, I don't want to, slack off too much. I feel like we get into that system of work, 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 and I'll rest later, and then we just never actually rest. And like you said, we're not replaceable, but we can be replaced. I feel like that mindset is kind of intertwined in most of our heads. Like, I don't want to be replaced. I don't want someone else to take my job. Like, what if I come back and then, like, they have nothing there for me? Like, it's a scary thing to think about, but realistically, like, that is the world we're in, and we have AI as well. Like, it's just really hard with all the aspects. Like, how do you really rest in, like, things like that?
Good question. I think rest is about strategy, as I mentioned. Yeah, don't take this example, but I'm going to give you an example, right? So you're working. And what you find, especially from us that comes from the communities that we both come from, we don't take any sick leave, right? So I remember when I was working as a social worker, I took no sick leave. I was actually quite proud of myself until I realized that none of my colleagues are doing the same thing. They go on holiday and they come back, I've got a cold. And then I realized that, wait a minute, at the end of my year appraisal, I don't get told, oh, Ngozi, you took no sick leave. Here's a promotion. Now, the point is, I'm not trying to say to use sick leave for anything ulterior. What I am saying is that you can use rest, you can use times off as strategy. You know, this is not the talk, but as I say to a lot of people, you don't enter into a workplace with no strategy. The moment I start a workplace, I've got an exit strategy in mind. Be it a promotion, be it leaving a job. You know, you do your 6 months probational period, and then what I would normally say, it takes about a year maybe to get truly confident. After a year, my question is, what are you waiting for? Maybe you want to do one more year. You should be seeking other opportunities. That's if you want to. So, but you can only do that when you think, when you plan, and when you strategize, and you can't strategize on the go. No general that sits down about to plan a war does it on the go. They plan, they think, they strategize. We may not call it rest, but the point is they don't strategize on the go. What happens is that they might have to reevaluate on the go when they realize that the enemy's party has more soldiers than they thought. That's different. But because they already had a plan to begin with. So the issue isn't the rest. The issue is we don't have a plan. We don't start off with a plan. We don't consider a plan and then make changes as we go. So if we truly incorporated rest and times after work, so for example, before your upcoming appraisal, you should already be thinking about what you want the next year to begin. But you can only do that when you think and pause and you rest, right? Can you do that when you're undergoing your thinking? You don't have that time. You're thinking about your car note. You're thinking about the bill. You're thinking about your relationship. You're thinking about TikTok. You're thinking about so many different things. But if you take a bit of a pause, take a bit of a break, the question I would ask you is then, you've been in this job for 2 years. Are you even happy? Do you enjoy this? Is this what you want to do? Is this what you studied for? You might go, I don't really like working in a library. This is not really, I studied physics. This is not what I want to do. But you can only get to that point if you take some times of pause and reflection. Hope that answers your question.
Hi, great speech. How do things like racism, homophobia, and misogyny like seed mistrust in our communities and distract us from like focusing on class consciousness or collective resistance? And how can rest like help with that?
Really good point. What I didn't say, which I think could be what you're alluding to, is that a lot of the isms that we experience, though real, though valid, and maybe similar to the point that I mentioned about if we constantly talk about that, it does keep us distracted. It keeps us infighting. It keeps us sometimes focused on the problems and not on the solutions. I'm a very solution-orientated person. That's why I created the Rest Revolution. I don't just sit there and say, as a black woman, it's really hard for me. I say, okay, well, it is hard, but I get up every single day. So what can I do to create a container for other black women? Now, that doesn't mean every single person here is going to create something. Sometimes you can be part of something, right? Sometimes you use your writing, you use your reposting, you use your sharing. So to answer your question, can you just repeat the question again? Because my ADHD makes me forget what was just asked.
How are like the isms again distract us or seed mistrust in our own communities to prevent us from focusing on class consciousness or collective resistance, like fighting back or, you know, like creating safety for everyone?
Trauma. right? Because these isms create trauma, right? If you've gone through homophobia, if you've gone misogyny or misogyny, you're traumatized. And when we focus on our trauma and we focus on it, we get fuel in endless anger and endless outrage. But then we don't use that fuel, that power, to create different solutions. So one way is to go therapy, right? For many of us, we're in therapy for things done unto us. For many of us, we're in therapy for the people that should be going into therapy, right? So if many of us decided to go therapy or do some sort of personal development, whether it's coaching, even things like this, right? We can begin to heal the parts of us that are fragmented, the parts of us that get easily triggered. Because at the end of the day, some of you guys could be triggered, that ain't my fault, because that trigger is your trigger. Now, I can be more sensitive and think in ways of, oh, how can I have said this? But some people always get triggered because people are deregulated. So one of the reasons why maybe the question that was asked comes from that point of, if we always talk about the difficulties, I get that, right? Some people need to hear it again. Some people have heard it enough. So a lot of it is down to trauma. I've been in therapy for 10 years, so I'm not easily triggered. That's why I'm able to create sustainable solutions. However, if you're constantly traumatized by what you see, for example, the Israel and Palestinian war, you're constantly traumatized, you will not be able to regulate yourself, nor would you be able to come together and to create sustainable action and change. So one of my biggest things would be therapy, or take some time to self-reflect and build self-awareness. Why do I get triggered when I see my boss in the boardroom? Is it because of what happened to me as a child with my father? We've got to, because I don't know if anyone's been bullied in the workplace. Has anyone been bullied? Put your hand up. Or gone through something, right? You would think that as adults you wouldn't get bullied, right? It's meant for kids. So the question is, why are many of us getting bullied in the workplace? Because these people are carrying trauma. Not excusing their behavior at all. I'm just giving you a live example that the person that is bullying you is carrying some sort of level of trauma. If they sorted it out, we wouldn't be getting bullied in the first place. So that gives you another example of why we need to personally and collectively heal the trauma that we experience individually and in our communities, so that we don't reinforce racial stereotypes, but move forward collectively to change society for the better. So I don't know if there's another question, but I wanted to find out, before we go to the last question, just put a raise of hands. Did your definition of rest change or stay the same? For those that it changed, put your hand up. Okay, so semi. For those that stayed the same, put your hand up. Okay, good, sir.
How do you convince, like, for example...
Sorry, there's a microphone, sir. My ears ain't good.
Yeah. For example...
Don't worry, I'm just going to stand here.
For example, say like African parents, the way they have the mentality of like, I'm not going to change. How do you inspire them and let them know that maybe you do need to take a break? Like, how can you tell them about...
Change the African parents.
Yeah, like how can I tell them, you know, there's more to life than work.
So you want to know how you inspire your African parents to change?
For example, you've mentioned a lot of good points that I do think are very valid, and I could tell my mom, be like, hey, by the way, this is very true, but she'll be like, that's not what I'm used to. I'm used to, this is what I know, so I'm gonna keep going with that. But it's like, the world is different now. How can I let her know without making it look like I'm attacking her or like not validating what she already believes in?
Do you want me to give you the nice answer, the real answer?
The real answer.
There's no guarantee. Your focus is on yourself now.
It's like, because I already know, but it's like, how can I let her know and be like, it's okay to take a break?
That's what I mean, you focus on yourself. And by modeling it, she might see the difference, right? One of the things that I've experienced as a first-generation Nigerian woman is that in the way I sustainably add rest to my life, my mum has learned to do that. But there's no talking to my mum that's going to make her, because you know how African parents can be. They're the ones that are right? Sometimes, unfortunately, it's life. My mum's health scares has taught her a lesson. I'll ask her, so all of your working hard, what has it got you? It's gotten you high cholesterol, high blood pressure, right? And that's a real thing, because people die of that. And she has said to myself, the way that she regrets the way she, but she didn't know any better. So my biggest thing would be for you to model it, right? And lastly, also, find other words to use. If rest is too much of a trigger word, our parents think rest is lazy. You can't sleep past 8 o'clock in African households. They'll be like, are you dead? What's going on? Use different words. Find different words, whether it's in your language, whether it's English. For example, so last example, mental health is a big thing within Asian and African communities, right? It's got a lot of stigma attached. So I tell people, why would you use the word mental health if it's causing such a big issue? Change the words. So rather than saying, Mum, I think you're anxious, and you're like, I'm not anxious. Why don't you say, Mum, well, how are you feeling right now? My shoulders are quite tense. I say, that's it then, that's what I'm saying. What's that in your stomach? Oh, I've got like pain in my stomach. That's anxiety. You can change the language. We don't have to be, they have to understand mental health. They need to understand the rest. Find other words that we can be used to help the older generation. But the biggest thing as I end right now is you need to be the model. I'm not saying we can't help the older generation, because there's some people here that are that generation. But what I am saying is that you have to model something different, so that the next generation after you, and hopefully the generation that came before you, can see something different. But if we keep trying to change the old generation, we're not going to change ourselves. So we've got to focus on modeling the change we want to see. And then those around us will hopefully change.
Sorry, I think we've run out of time for questions, but hopefully you'll join us in the break and we can continue the conversation.